So I've cut some bits of oak that are about 10mm by about 6mm across. First thing to do is to measure your bits of timber. You need 5 pieces, all exactly the same length. Now I've cut 5 so that I've got a spare just in case. So using a tenon saw and a bencher, cut all 5 pieces to the same length. Once you've got your 5 bits, you need to mark out where the holes are going to go for the hinge pins. Now I've got a 45 combination square, and just with a pencil, 45 degree on one side, flip the combination square over, and a 45 degree on the other side, and this should put a mark half the thickness down from the end of the piece of timber. So I'm using a 2.5mm drill bit because I'm using a toothpick as the hinge pin. Now position your work under the drill and then pull the drill down in place. Move the depth stop upwards and that will hold the jig in place while you clamp it up with the F clamps. Don't forget to remove the depth stop afterwards so you can drill your work. Position your work in the corner of the jig and drill right the way through. Don't forget to remove the waste after the drilling operation, otherwise the holes won't be in the correct place. Now sometimes because of the oak the hole won't go right the way through, and in this case it didn't. So I've taken the work out, switched it round and drilled it again. Give your pieces of work a light sanding with some glass paper to remove any excess waste before you glue them together. Now you're going to need 4 of the best pieces you've got of the 5. Take your toothpick and insert it into the holes that were drilled earlier. And then position your hinge so it's ready to glue up. And we're going to be gluing it together with some PVA glue, and I've got a couple of small G clamps there to hold everything in place while it dries. Put your PVA glue on the pieces that are going to be glued together, and then with one of God's glue sticks just smear the PVA glue across evenly on each of the pieces that are going to be glued together. Position them together on your workbench or your work surface, and you need to ensure that they have enough space to rotate. Just pushed them a bit too far there, pushing them out a bit, and then I'm just measuring with the extra piece of timber I had left over, and then you need to clamp them together with a couple of G clamps, and then you leave them for 24 hours to dry. They're now dry, so you remove the pins from both ends of the assembly, and we need to remove any excess glue, and we're going to do this using some P80 glass paper. So pop your work in the vise and then sand off the top and bottom to make them nice and smooth. Now I've reduced the length of the sanding in this video. You will have to sand them for a lot longer than is shown here. And once your piece of work is all nice and smooth, then we need to cut it in half, and I'm going to mark the center of my piece of work, and then using a tenon saw I'm going to cut it in half. Make sure you've got a nice line at 90 degrees to the edge of your timber using your square, and then using a tenon saw I'm just going to cut it into two pieces. It'll fit together nicely, and then you can pop the hinge pin in, which is the toothpick, and have a little tester. It should rotate reasonably freely. If it doesn't, then you need to remove these bits here, which will allow it to rotate with ease. And I'm just going to use a piece of glass paper, and I'm going to clamp my work to the end of the bench hook, just round those corners off. And I'm going to take the glass paper and just round the other corners off on the other part of the hinge that I've inserted into it. And you really want to get it so that those hinge corners don't stick out when you move the piece of work, otherwise they'll interfere with the bit of work you're going to stick it onto. Now I've added a taper onto this piece of hinge just so that it looks better when you glue it onto your final piece of work. Clean it up with some glass paper, and I need to remove the excess hinge pins. Just do that with a tenon saw. You can always use a junior hacksaw if necessary. Then I'm just going to pop out the hinge pin with the excess I've cut off, and then using a bit of PVA glue I'm going to glue those hinge pins in place. Now it's important you didn't use too much PVA glue, otherwise you'll just end up gluing the whole thing together and it won't rotate. And in this operation I've just squeezed a bit too much through, so I'm just going to remove it with the waste bits of toothpick I'm not using. Put the whole thing back together again, push the hinge pin through, and then remove the excess glue. Job done. Now all you need to do is glue it onto your work.